So lads, 4 months ago, I made a video. You can see it right here. Paige Bueckers is being set up to fail with "She's not Caitlin" as the tagline, and it was talking about how literally Paige Bueckers was being caught. They were speaking about Paige as something she's not, purely because they wanted to belittle Caitlin. This was 152 days ago now. This is 152 days ago. And even as little as 2 weeks ago, there are people commenting the anyone but Caitlin crew are setting up both Caitlin and Juju for favor or for failure. If I'm looking at the top comment on this, someone says Paige will have an easier time. The older players and media will support Paige. Paige's own coach isn't even supporting her, ironically. It says Gino Auriemma has been trying to downplay Caitlin Clark for years. A choice with Paige Bueckers to start to watch. Man, even Gino Auriemma seems like he's given up on Paige Bueckers as this super generational player. And the worst part is Gino Auriemma. Like, there is one player, there are people that should think Paige Bueckers is better than Caitlin Clark. Those people are Paige's family, Paige Bueckers herself, and Paige Bueckers' coach. Anyone who's not one of those people, if they think Paige is better than Caitlin Clark, you're delusional. And the fact that her coach seems to be throwing her in the bus every chance he gets, not a good sign. But I said this back in the day, and I'm actually going to put the same thumbnail with the same title, except one or two words maybe differently. Instead of "is being set up to fail," Paige Bueckers was set up to fail, something like that, so that YouTube doesn't almost shadow ban the video. But with that, it's the truth. Paige Bueckers is a good player. She's averaging 18.8 points per game. She scored 20 points. And everyone's talking about, oh, look, 50% from the field, 40% from three. She did it in a game they won by 37 points. They play in the Big East. They play in a terrible conference. Like, let's take a look at UConn's schedule. How many good teams have they beat this year? They killed Louisville. Not particularly good. Just about beat Ole Miss. Close game against UNC. But, like, they beat Iowa State, who aren't good. And let's take a look just this year. Sarah Strong's been the top scorer in the majority of the games. And Paige is a much better offensive player, and she's a defense player. Not a bad defense player, much better offensive player than defense player. Like, they barely beat Creighton. The team struggled against Creighton. They killed DePaul, I guess. But, like, they're playing in the Big East. So then they go and lose to Tennessee. Not a conference game. So it doesn't matter. And then they play South Carolina. They're going to get destroyed by South Carolina. Like, we know that. And Paige is going to get hers. And people don't understand the difference between efficiency for efficiency's sake and actual efficiency. Because if you guys don't understand, Paige Bueckers and Caitlin Clark Caitlin Clark in college shoot nearly an identical effective field goal percentage. And with Caitlin Clark's field or free throw percentage, as far as I'm aware, true shooting percentage wise, Caitlin Clark is in fact basically, like, I think there are some seasons she's been higher, some seasons been lower, but their effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage are the exact same. If you guys don't know what effective field goal percentage is, it takes into account the fact that a 3-pointer is worth more than a 2. So you might be saying, oh, 53%, look at the percentage from 3, percentage from 2. The only benefit to looking at it that way through field goal percentage is that you give up less opportunities for transitions off the defensive rebound. But, like, that's the only thing you could look at it. But also, you have to take into account that the step back deep threes, the difficulty of shots that Caitlin Clark's taking. But you're like, oh, well, Paige takes better shots. No, Paige won't shoot the ball. Paige literally will not. She will not take on a game. They're not even remotely similar as players. Paige Bueckers is not. People are like, oh, she's generational. Paige Bueckers will never be the best player on a team that wins, just because of her style of play. That is not saying Paige Bueckers will not win multiple championships, will not be the best third option, will not be an all-star, will not be an all-W player. That's not saying that. Paige Bueckers, just because of how she doesn't have, like, there's a certain, like, way you have to be wired to be the number one, to be the player on a championship winning team. And I'm not, like, Caitlin Clark is that. It is that. And Paige could be the best player in the championship team if she's in a Minnesota Lynx type situation with a whole bunch of real good players around her, and there's like 5 players who on any given day could be the best player on their team. Like, if you surrounded, like, it's not going to work with Enrique, because in fairness to Enrique isn't good enough, but she has that mindset to be the alpha, the 1A. She's just not good enough to do that at the championship level. But like, let's just say you somehow got Paige to the Minnesota Lynx. Let's say Paige hypothetically goes back for college this year. Chicago Sky suck and the Lynx get the number 1 overall pick. By putting in Paige Bueckers for Bridget Carleton, the Lynx become the best team in the WNBA. Or even just put her in for Courtney Williams. And you've got Courtney Williams, Carleton, McBride, Fee, and Alana Smith. It's the best 5 in the W without any like go-to player outside of maybe Fee. But even Fee's not as much of a go-to player as an Aja Wilson, as a Stewie, as a Sabrina. And that's fine. That's completely fine. But I'm sorry, nobody has ever said that like a 13, or let's just say an NBA equivalent, that a 17 point per game connective piece is better than the star. Like, nobody ever said Drew Holiday was better than Giannis. And that's like, I know they're different positions, but also Caitlin Clark and Paige don't play the same position, or they don't play it nearly the same way. But like, that's basically almost an equivalent. Like, she's going to be the glue guy. She might be the best glue guy in the WNBA. But Paige Bueckers is not a 1A. She's not even a 1B. Like, there are good teams that she can be the best player on, but she needs real good players around her to do that. Paige isn't going to carry anyone, whereas Caitlin Clark is the system. Paige can be an unbelievable cog in a system. Caitlin is the system. And every time Caitlin has been with even competent players, that system works. Like, the Indiana Fever were starting Christy Wallace last year. They were starting Christy Wallace. Then, when they dropped Christy Wallace, they were starting Katie Lou Samuelson. They started Nalissa Smith. The Indiana Fever started the whole season Nalissa Smith. Like, Aaliyah Boston did not show up in great shape. She didn't show up with sharpness. Caitlin was a bit iffy to start the year coming straight out of college. And then when it got clicking, the Caitlin Clark system was the most unstoppable offense in the WNBA. And I don't think anyone would argue that. Like, yes, obviously, the team's defense needs to improve. Caitlin Clark herself, her defense needs to improve, especially off the ball. But the thing is with the Caitlin Clark system is it's proven, even at the WNBA level, it is a near impossible offense to stop. The Paige Bueckers system doesn't even work in college because it's not the Paige Bueckers system. Running around through Paige doesn't even work in college. Like, that's what people don't realize. Like, Caitlin was the top 4 player in the WNBA. If you take away those first 10 games, Caitlin Clark is probably second in the MVP race. Obviously, the first 10 games count, so you can't take them out. But for the last 30 games, she was probably the second best player in the WNBA. And post-Olympic break, Caitlin Clark was the best player in the WNBA in the regular season, between her or Nafisa Collier. And Paige Bueckers will not make, she probably will make the All-American first team, but it will be because of name recognition and UConn tax, not because of her play. There is no point in comparing Paige Bueckers to Caitlin Clark. Because yes, back in the day, Paige Bueckers, when they were 17, 18 years old, 16 years old, Paige was better than Caitlin. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. When they got to 19, 20, it was a debate. It really was a debate. But from that 2022 offseason into that 2023 season onwards, the year when Paige was out with the ACL injury and Caitlin took over the world of basketball, Paige had her best ever season last year. She had her best ever statistical season, got them to the Final Four, and they lost. Paige, surrounded by number 1 recruits, surrounded by 5 stars everywhere, lost to Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes without a single 5-star recruit other than Caitlin Clark on that team. There's no point comparing them because it's not even close.